After a sensual encounter with an anonymous woman, Matt can't believe what he'll have to do just to learn her name. Welcome back to Nonstop Recap. Today we'll be going over the 2000 romantic comedy 100 Girls. Gazing through the windows of a woman's dormitory, Matt wonders which of them could be his soulmate. He explains that he recently encountered a woman in the elevator after a party but never saw her face. When the power went out, they shared a wonderful conversation before ultimately sleeping together. When he woke up, she was gone. His roommate Rod doesn't understand the significance of the story, but Matt explains that his previous encounters with women have all been lackluster, even failing to get a kiss from his own prom date. Rod, meanwhile, decides to get women by hanging weights from his crotch to increase his length. When Matt reveals that the elevator girl left her underwear behind, Rod sniffs them before launching into sexist diatribes, causing Matt to wonder why Rod hates women so much. And don't worry, we will learn the answer. For now, Rod suggests finding the bra that matches the underwear, so Matt devises a plan to infest the women's dormitory with rats and then pose as a maintenance man so he can enter the dorm and rifle through the girls' drawers. He eventually catches a student named Crick assaulting his girlfriend Patty. Matt intervenes by grabbing Crick's nipples and violently twisting them. Crick returns fire and it becomes a battle of wills until Matt eventually relents. Crick leaves and Matt stays behind with Patty. As she tends to his wounds, Matt starts to become aroused, especially when Patty leans over to kiss his bruised nipples. But he shies away when she tries to kiss him on the lips, and she thinks he's embarrassed to hook up with her because she has a reputation for being promiscuous. Trying to lighten the mood, he plays with her Benoit balls, only to leave embarrassed when he learns they're meant to go inside of her. Rod later asks Matt for a status report on the search for his soulmate, and Matt says that he's had to find new ways of getting into the women's dorms, such as prank calling them or rigging the air conditioner so he'll have an excuse to fix it. He eventually meets Cynthia, who he's unable to speak to in anything but garbled gibberish. He also finds it nearly impossible not to look at her chest. It turns out that Cynthia uses this to her advantage, using numerous men as her errand boys. Matt later fixes a TV in the women's common room where Arlene challenges him to a game of strip foosball. After she wins by a landslide, the other women pull Matt's shorts down and they're impressed by what they see. Rod rags on Matt for losing to a girl while adding another weight to his crotch. Matt then rigs the AC again and he and Rod watch through a telescope as women undress to escape the heat. Matt tells Rod about the women in the dorm and it's clear that he's getting to know them all quite well, but none of them seem to be the one he's looking for except potentially one girl who never leaves her room. He also mentions a lonely girl named Dora who sits alone and reads on Saturdays while everyone else is out. Rod and Matt then enroll in a women's studies class but get uncomfortable when most of the class seems bent on complaining about men. The teacher, Ms. Stern, calls the boys out for enrolling just to meet girls and tells them most boys don't make it through her course. Before long, Matt sneaks into a girl's room and has to hide in the shower when she comes home early. When he tries to hide the evidence of his intrusion by lowering the toilet seat, she catches him and attacks. She quickly stops, however, upon recognizing him as a former high school classmate. She introduces herself as Wendy. Matt tells Wendy about his mystery girl, and she decides to help him by keeping watch and running interference as he checks the rooms. He briefly thinks he's found a match and pours his heart out to the girl, but she turns out to be deaf. As Rod later goes on a rant about older and overweight women, Matt again wonders who hurt this man. Matt then shows Rod a personal ad he's taken out in the school newspaper telling his mystery girl that he'll wait for her in the basement every Thursday. Matt waits in the basement one Thursday when Wendy enters and invites him over to eat. He starts to realize that Wendy is the perfect girl next door. When she tells him a tragic story about her polio scenario-ridden father, he can only respond with a story about his childhood fear of the Wicked Witch. This offends Wendy, and Matt wonders why men always put up force fields around their vulnerability. Wendy then comes up with an idea. She shaves Matt's legs and dresses him up as a woman who she names Francesca. She tells Matt to use this persona to talk to the girls and see if any of them have recently hooked up in an elevator. He tries it but gathers no new information. Wendy then suggests he just get to know the girls and see which one gives him the same vibes as the one he met. Matt engages in small talk with all the girls in the dorm, but he can only talk to Cynthia while dressed as Francesca. As he and Cynthia go jogging in huge pants meant to burn cellulite, Cynthia flees from a boy named Sam and tells Matt that she's afraid of being seen in her embarrassing pants because she doesn't know what will happen to her if she loses her ability to manipulate men. Matt later talks to Dora, but she's standoffish because she can tell Matt finds her unattractive. When Matt later plays another foosball game against Arlene, he schools her and they argue about the merits of men versus women. When she inevitably gets offended, he uses her distraction to score a goal. She wrestles him to the ground and accuses him of cheating before grabbing her clothes and storming off. In class, Matt shares that men and women feel so much tension because a lack of established rules between them causes each side to feel like they're treated unfairly. But Miss Stern disagrees and says there are rules, all established by the evil patriarchy. Later, Matt sees that Dora isn't where he usually finds her and enters her dorm to find it full of spicy underwear and erotic drawings. He goes outside and finds her on the roof before racing upstairs to get to her. On the way, he causes two men to drop a couch, which slams into Cynthia's face. On the roof, Dora tells Matt that she's tired of people either ignoring her or pitying her, but that he doesn't need to worry because she was never going to jump. She just likes considering the idea. Matt goes back to Dora's room and learns that the books she always reads are actually trashy romance novels. Rod later sees Matt dressed as Francesca and fails to recognize him, trying to look up his dress. Matt tells Wendy that he feels violated by Rod and wonders if this is how women feel all the time. He'll soon encounter this feeling under much more harrowing circumstances. When Patty invites Matt to eat cereal with her, she notes that she can tell he's into somebody else by the way he looks at her. If he loved her, she says, he'd look at her like a little boy looks at a present before he opens it. Crick soon barges in and accuses Matt of trying to steal his woman. He pushes Matt against a wall and Patty attacks him. Matt staples Crick's ponytail to the floor and they flee together up the stairs. Crick initially runs the wrong way in pursuit, but one of Patty's Benoit balls falls out of her and draws Crick their way. As he starts to rush them, another Benoit ball falls out and Crick trips on it, tumbling down the stairs. Matt and Patty celebrate by making love while smearing paint on each other. Matt has fun, but he doesn't believe it to be the divine connection he's looking for. He later asks Rod about his negative attitude toward women, but Rod tries to pretend that he does great with women by claiming to have slept with Francesca. Matt gets offended and storms out. That Thursday, the unseen elevator girl visits Matt as he waits in the basement and tells him to stop looking for her. He tries to chase after her, but she gets away. He seeks comfort from Wendy, which leads to a gleeful pillow fight between them. Could she be the elevator girl, or is she hiding another secret? With finals approaching, Matt decides to better his chances of meeting his soulmate by improving his karma. He performs good deeds for the women around the dorm, which includes helping Arlene win a doubles foosball match against Crick and his friend. They win, and the girls pull Crick's shorts down, revealing him to be embarrassingly tiny. Afterward, Matt opens up about his struggles with learning how to be a man because his father was a man who chased after ice cream trucks in his underwear. And if he can't understand his own gender, how can he understand the opposite? He then reflects on how much he loves the female body as he watches a video he's made of Dora to prove to her that she's beautiful. Matt later discovers Cynthia's ruined face and finds it suddenly easier to talk to her. When she gets angry about her new look, she kicks a hole in the wall. Matt's been avoiding Patty since they slept together, so he visits her dressed as Francesca Francesca. When Crick overhears them talking about Matt, he assaults Patty before threatening to force himself on Francesca. In a brutal act of self-defense, Matt bites Crick's tongue off. But don't think Crick's gotten his full comeuppance just yet. Matt later comes home and finds Rod pleasuring himself and learns that Rod suffers from a medical deformity that displaces a man's urethra. Rod's hatred of women stems from the horrified reaction he received the first time a woman saw his condition. Finals approach and Matt decides to make one last grand gesture, standing in front of the women's dorm and pouring his heart out for everyone to hear. But it works too well, and everyone listening claims to be the girl from the elevator. When he sees one figure shrouded in silhouette, he realizes his mystery girl must be the one who never comes out of her room. Matt races to her room, but she says it isn't her and gives him directions to Patty's room. When Matt goes to Patty's door, she points out that in all the time he spent obsessing over his fantasy girl, he was never interested in the real Patty herself. Hurt, she tells him to just go away. Matt mopes around campus but learns that Cynthia is at least doing well, having discovered a penchant for martial arts. In class, Matt complains to Ms. Stern that he's tired of being blamed for the world's problems, and says that feminists are just like all of the other hate-spewing ists of the world. He later finds Crick banging on Patty's door and reveals himself to be Francesca. He voices intentions to report Crick's assault and causes an impromptu Me Too movement, when it turns out Crick has done this to other women as well. Matt then learns that Wendy is a lesbian and sets her up with Arlene. He also sets up Dora and Rod by throwing the power out while they're on an elevator together. As the dorm lights candles to get through the power outage, he decides to make one last attempt with Patty. He remembers Patty's observation that men regard the women they love as they would a birthday present, and he begins to unwrap her as the film ends on one final intimate kiss. Click one of the videos on screen right now.